What's up, guys? That Really Gross Guy here. We are back, and today I wanted to talk about how to best utilize a resource booster. And I'm talking about the one that doubles the resources that you get for resources that are dropped. Now, there are a few things I want to go over for this video. Of course, I want to mention some of the best ways to utilize that resource booster, but I also want to kind of go over a few things that, number one, cannot be picked up by resource boosters, as well as for those things that can be not only picked up and doubled, but also using other means throughout the game, even double it more than once. So we're going to get right into that and start talking about some things. Now, of course, if you need to do some grinding and all of that stuff, a lot of the resources in games, pretty much everything that you see laying around on the ground, as well as some other things, can be doubled by this resource booster. So I highly suggest going through, if you need anything to regularly grind, if you have a Necros, it is a great way to, number one, take your Desecrate and create more loot drops for you so that you can take those resources and double them. This is great for building dojos, building weapons. This is a very new player friendly way of doing things, as long as this player can get their hands on a Necros. Now, I know Necros does take a little bit to get the base version. If you can get your hands on a Necros Prime, that's another way to do it, but this is kind of more mid-player kind of a tip. The other thing is, if you can get your hands on a Smita Kavat. The Smita Kavat can use the charm ability, and that charm ability also doubles resource drops. So with the combination of a Smita and the double resource booster, you will ultimately multiply your drops by 4 times. And if you have a Necros, you create more drops, which means you can double those resources that much more often. But that's kind of a given for you experienced players, you veterans. You already know that. You already know that is possible. What I do want to go over is a few things that you may not necessarily know, such as if you have a resource booster that you purchased and you get a resource booster as a login reward. These resource boosters do not add time. And what I mean by that is, if you have 7 days of a resource booster and you get a 3-hour drop, you do not have 7 days and 3 hours of resource booster. You actually have 3 hours of 4 times, so you double and then double again of resource booster, and then when that one login reward times out after that 3 hours, you go back to your regular double. So you could potentially increase your drops by 4 times, and like I was saying, you get a Smita Kavat and a Necros, you could be rolling in resources. But the other thing as well is, this does not necessarily have to do with things that you see laying around on the ground. You can also double Kuva, which is very, very useful. We'll talk about Kuva here in just a second. And Cryotic. And Cryotic is used through excavations. So that is another great way to do it. Endo is not a resource, so it does not get doubled. And the other things that you cannot double are any of the loots that the Vombulus drops on the plains of Eidolon, as well as the Eidolon shards and all that stuff themselves. So no sentient shards, Eidolon stuff can be doubled using a resource deal. So that is a big deal, because I know some people have purchased these through the market, specifically trying to farm those Vombulus. So that is not a thing. Also, there are a number of other things like fish and the mining tools on the plains of Eidolon that do double your resources. So those are other things. So if you need to farm those, you can do so, which will help with your standing in Cetus. So when it comes to the most important things, after getting away with all that regular resource farming, what I think personally is the most important things for you to try to do with your resource booster is traces. Well, not number one, but traces. Traces are absolutely a great thing to grab while you have a resource booster. This is another thing that you don't see lying around on the ground. If you run those fissure missions and you get traces, you do have a chance of doubling you will be doubling those traces basically. So I believe the amount of traces you can drop is anywhere from 6 to 30 something, which means that with your double resource drop, you can potentially get 12 to 60 something traces, which is a big deal, especially if you're trying to make a lot of your relics radiant. So I highly suggest that. I have some footage of me going through and running some of those fissures, and you can see at the end the traces are just coming in pretty quickly. You can run a defense or a survival fissure mission for a very long time and walk out of there with hundreds and hundreds of traces. So that's mostly for you veteran guys that want to run 40 minutes in a survival or like 60 waves of defense. Anyways, so traces, absolutely great thing to grab. The other thing that you can get, which is kind of situational, I've already kind of touched on this, are fish on the Plains of Eidolon. Now, if you have not done your seat of standing, fish are a great way to get your standing in Cetus up. You can double your fish. The way this works is every time you catch a fish, you will get a duplicate of that fish. So if you catch a small mawfish or a small norg, you will get a duplicate of that small mawfish or that small norg. Anyways, this is once you leave and go back to Cetus, you will see in the final screen, you will see those fish and, of course, doubled of those fish that you have actually acquired. The only thing with Cetus is you can only turn in so much for standing in one day, so I highly suggest just stockpiling a bunch of fish and doing this multiple times on multiple different days. Trade these in for standing, or if you need the resources, which you probably do if you are a newer player, you can just stockpile these fish using your double resources and just get those resources like crazy. So that's one way to do it. You'll see that you can farm fish in ponds, you can farm them out in the ocean, you can farm them in the lake. I believe you can also farm out of like the little rivers. There's a couple rivers in there. You can see footage of me doing all sorts of fish farming that way. Now, some of the best fish you can get, you need to be kind of further in the game, further in Cetus standing in order to get the spears and the bait in order to do so. However, you can very quickly climb the Cetus standing ladder if you start out with a double resource booster and fish like crazy. The other thing that you can do on the Plains of Eidolon, which a lot of newer players will definitely need, especially as they start getting through some of their focus stuff, are wisps. Now, personally, I believe wisps they're really not that hard to farm, but people make it almost as though they're the rarest thing in the game, which they're not really. As long as you stick around the water, you run certain paths in the Plains of Eidolon, you can bump into these wisps fairly often. If you want to do this when you have a resource booster, because instead of just getting one single wisp, you will get two, which I think is a great way to do things. While I'm searching for those wisps, I just usually kill Vombulus to get some of their loot while I'm out there. But the reason why I don't think this is the best way to get wisps is every time the Plague Star event comes back, which currently it is ongoing, wisps you can actually purchase by doing the event. So I don't feel like wisps are as important as they used to be during this double resource drop. But it is absolutely a good way to do it if that event is not going on. So fish and wisps, absolutely great ways to get some standing and resources that are rare on the Plains of Eidolon. We've talked about traces, and we've kind of talked about Kuva, but Kuva is used in a number of different things. We'll talk about just the bare basic use of Kuva is ribbons. If you have ribbons and you want to re-roll the ribbons to get the best possible ribbon you can, you absolutely have to be farming for Kuva. And you can farm immense amount of Kuvas by doing the Kuva survival, running a Necros, keeping that survival going for a very, very long time, using a Smita Kavat in case it uses its charm at the right time. You can double your Kuva with the charm as well as double it again with your double resource drop. If you are lucky and you get a login, like I was saying, you can multiply that Kuva drop by 6 if you do all of the above. So Kuva, very, very, very important. But other than that, those are probably the most important things for you to do in your farming. I'll go over the list real quick again. Basic farming, bring a Necros, bring a Smita if you can. That will get you all of your salvage and all that goofy stuff as a newer player that you need for all of your weapons and your dojo and research and all that other stuff. Very basic, very, very bare minimum. Fish and the gems from the Plains of Eidolon are going to get your standing and are going to be fairly valuable with a lot of different things that you can purchase around Cetus, such as the Zaws and stuff like that. Wisps, another thing that you can go through and get. Like I said, if the event is on, you're better off getting those through the event, but if not, farm those wisps with that double resource drop. Traces. Everybody's running fissures anyways. You might as well jump in and just grab as many traces as you possibly can. And of course, in my opinion, the most important thing to do with your resource booster is to grab as much Kuva as you possibly can for all of your ribbons, to basically re-roll the crap out of those things. And lastly, I wanted to make sure you guys were aware, all that Eidolon stuff, all those Vombulus, that loot does not drop. The Endo, or it does not double. The Endo does not double. Mods do not double. So just keep that in mind. The other thing, which I did not test out and I do not know if is completely true, is resource boosters supposedly from login rewards. So the ones that you don't purchase and you get through logins supposedly do not double Kuva and Cryotic. I don't know if that is completely true. If you guys could leave in the comments proving or disproving that little fact. That is just a statistic pulled from the wiki, and I have not been able to test that as I bought my resource booster for this video, so I do not know off the top of my head. But anyways, that's going to be it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys again in the next video. Blah!